Jerry Summers has his name on many important court cases that I've read with great interest and have made arguments about. In fact, State versus Downey, State versus Hicks, those are two roadblock cases. And Hicks is a Chattanooga area case, Suck Creek Road, where the high court decided to launch into an unconstitutional area and create not law but policy, allowing an unconstitutional infringement on the rights of the people. But that's the case. And it came from the defense of Jerry Summers of Mr. Hicks. Then there's another case in the early 2000s, Chattanooga versus Davis, also a very important case showing that cities have a civil authority, but not a punitive authority. That's Chattanooga versus Davis, out again of the law offices of Jerry Summers. And right now there's a case on appeal on the problem. Well, not the problem of the TBI. Being paid for findings of intoxication levels in blood. And the high court in Tennessee ruled against Rosemary DeCosimo, the defendant and that Jerry Summers is defending, and the group there downtown at Summers, Ruffalo and Rogers are putting together a brief making the argument to get that case heard in Washington. So Jerry Summers is 77 years old. He's been practicing law for 53 years as a prosecutor, a city judge in Saudi Daisy for 15 years, and also a private attorney. Now, what we're going to talk about now is not, you might say, not hot legal issues such as these. And I didn't mention that there's the Franklin case, which was decided favorably to the defendant, another roadblock case out of the Jerry Summers law firm. So these are cases that I've not written about it at Nuganomics.com, but you've heard about it here if you tune into the David Tullis Show here at 92.7 FM and 95.3 FM HD4. The number is 800-8949, 800-8949. And the question is, let's say, very off speed for a hot and heavy Monday. And the person we're going to talk about is one in a picture. I'm holding up a picture for you, my Facebook viewer, and his name is Raulston Schoolfield, and he's a man. He's being pictured in Nashville during his impeachment trial. Yes, an impeachment trial of a Chattanooga area Hamilton County judge, Raulston Schoolfield. He was impeached by the state house and tried in the state senate, and he's holding his head up very cockily. And Jack Chambliss, another local attorney, blue blood. Kind of high-end attorney, called him kind of an ostrich neck habit of presentation, nose high, kind of long neck. And Jerry Summers, tell my listeners about why we're hearing about this man now who had his big trial that went for 5 weeks in Nashville. Who is Raulston Schoolfield?
Well, thank you, Dave, for having me. The Raulston Schoolfield was a judge back in the 50s up to 50 to 58. And he was quite a lawyer, trial lawyer, before he became a judge. His trial, when he was impeached from about June to July the 12th, 1958, was really you've heard of the term trial of the century. Well, this was the trial of the century in Tennessee in 1958. Judge Schoolfield, who was raised in a lawyer family, his father was a very prominent attorney. Together, they and another brother who left the firm for a while, represented most of the African Americans in the community. And back in those days, they were the champions. It's ironic that later on, Raulston, because of Brown versus Board and Education, which he thought was an infringement upon states' rights, he became known as a anti-integration and fan of or supported by the Klan and Ku Klux Klan and the White Citizens Council. Raulston was never anti-black. He was against the anti-states' rights movement. I mean, he felt that states' rights should have been the way to handle this issue of integration and not through the federal courts. He was a very unique individual, very outspoken. I knew him for a few years when I left the DA's office in 1966, and up until he died in 1982. I knew him a little bit. I became good friends with his son Carter, who in his own was a great trial lawyer. Gave up the practice of law and went into the boating business. But Raulston Schoolfield, it's a story of part of the history of the legal system and the political system in Hamilton County. He was always involved in politics. In a lot of the cases, he represented controversial clients, blacks charged with offenses against white people, but he was a great trial lawyer. And
rapists, gamblers,
right, and he in around 1950, he ran for 1948. He ran for judge and he had up and got defeated once, but he was a candidate of a reform group headed by attorney Jack Chambliss, very well known, very prominent lawyer, and they selected Raulston to try to be a reform candidate. At that time, when you look back in Chattanooga, I call Chattanooga during that era Little Chicago. We had everything that Chicago had.
Like what?
Well, gambling, gamblers, murders, so forth, but on a smaller scale, of course, because of the size of the two towns. But
prostitution, narcotics?
Very much so. And what happened is that they selected Raulston to try to help break up the ring that they had.
Well, was he trying to break up the ring because it was being protected by the police, or was he just wanting to go after crime? That's not really reform, though, going after crime.
You got to bear in mind that the elections were kind of rigged. One of the favorite tactics they used back in those days is what we would call the voter chain. And what you would do is they would get a blank ballot. They get a hold of those ahead of time. They give it to an individual. They would go in. It'd already be marked by the candidates supported by the gamblers and the people that were in control up to a point. And what they would do is they would up and go into the voting booth. And what they would do very simply would be they would substitute the already marked ballot for the one they were given. They would vote, come out, drop it in the box, and then they would take the new ballot and go back to a predesignated place where they could either be paid $1 or $2 for voting or get a drink of what we call Spro or white whiskey. And that's the way elections were run and rigged. And Jack Chambliss, bear in mind, Jack Chambliss was a World War II veteran. He came from a very prominent family. Jack Chambliss watched the Battle of Athens, which took place in 1946, where a group of veterans came back and they attempted and did successfully break up the political machine up in Athens, Tennessee, after a lot of controversy. And Jack decided to form a group called the Good Government League.
Well, let's just hold it right there because my listener needs to hear a word, just a slightly longer word, Jerry Summers, about the Battle of Athens in 1946. It was, you were mentioning, and Jack Chambliss was sort of inspired by this revolt of common people, many of them military veterans who weren't going to take guff from the sheriff. Well, just briefly, what happened in that battle? It was a gun battle.
Well, there was a gun battle, and it was controlled by the sheriff and his chief deputy. They'd kind of rotated one term after another, and the veterans armed themselves, got involved, and there was an exchange of gunfire. In fact, the ballot box had been stolen, and the sheriff had taken them into the jail, and the veterans were armed, and they went in there, and there was gunfire. And if you've heard of J.B. Collins, who was 100 years old, was covered that for the Chattanooga News Free Press, and he was there, and he wrote extensively about it. But basically, they were able to go in and seize the ballot box. It turned out that the legitimate ballot boxes, when they were open, that the veterans won, and so the sheriff and the machine was kicked out of office.
Okay, so this is I don't want to take too much time on that because it's not really about Judge Schoolfield. But what you're saying is that this is the reform movement, and Jack Chambliss and reform-minded lawyers thought, well, we need to have someone to protect the people from effectively the state interest, right? The police, from city government, who are protecting certain private criminals.
Well, I think that's where Jack got the idea and decided to do it. If they can do it in Athens, we can do it in Chattanooga. And that's how they picked Raulston. Now, Raulston was very controversial. He had been, there's the things in his youth that's part of the book. Some of it's humorous, some of it's not. He was kind of but they thought he would be the best candidate.
Why was he controversial? Involved in fist fights?
One little thing is that he agreed to take the bar exam for a buddy of his and misrepresented himself, and he got disciplined. He also had been fined, put in contempt by one of the criminal judges because he wouldn't represent two defendants in a criminal case. Well, today, if you represent two defendants in a criminal case, you'd probably be disciplined as well. But back in those days, it was a practice that was followed. But Raulston stood up to the judge and said, I can't do it. And the judge said, I'm going to fine you in contempt, fine him $50. And it was held up by the Tennessee Supreme Court. So he had a couple of scrapes. Plus, back in those days, David, lawyers didn't just, when they disagreed on a case, they didn't just accept the verdict. They sometimes engaged in fisticuffs outside the courtroom. So basically, Raulston had some scrapes, and a lot of people in Jack's Good Government League said, I don't think we can get behind him. And Jack says, well, we can handle him. If he don't, we'll get rid of him. But that's really started a lot of the problems with Schoolfield, except he created his own problems. He was always active in politics. There's in the books that talks about his relationship with President Truman. He exchanged letters with President Harry S. Truman. He also went out to Jefferson City and visited with President Truman. And he was, but what happened is that in '54, after Brown versus Board of Education came out requiring integration, Schoolfield got on Frank Clement and Gordon Browning about their soft stand on fighting integration. And as a result, what happened is they didn't respond to him. He was talked into running for governor, and he ran on only one issue, and that was very simply fighting integration. Now, this was going all around the South. Different governors took different stances. Some fought it very hard in Georgia and Alabama, Mississippi, other places. They didn't fight it quite as strenuously. But he decided he'd run for governor. He only got 27,000 votes, but he had one issue, and that's against integration. He traveled around the counties, went to the courthouse primarily, and ran for governor, and that developed a hatred between him and Frank Clements that never really healed. And then when in 57, after 58, after Raulston had fallen out with Jack Chambliss and his group, and they thought he was doing things improperly, that added more fuel on the fire. Schoolfield never had much a high opinion of Frank Clement. He described him as that whiskey drinking, Bible thumping SOB. And when it came that there were some complaints by the organized bar, Chattanooga, you have the Chattanooga Bar Association, which represents most of the lawyers. You have other groups. At one time, they had a group called the Hamilton Bar Association, which is basically the non-lawyers that represent insurance companies and hospitals and so forth. And Raulston was involved in that. Now we have the Chattanooga Trial Lawyers, which is substituted for them. But basically what happened, the lawyers that didn't like Schoolfield, they kept looking for things to get rid of him. And so ultimately it culminated where the papers were against him. The Times particularly, Schoolfield expressed some anti-Semitism comments, and the Times at that time, owned by the Ox family, got on him pretty good. And they were always against him. They attacked him. And the Free Press laid off for a long time. Mr. McDonald liked Schoolfield. And but
why did Roy McDonald like Schoolfield?
Well, I think the truth of the matter is Roy McDonald, I think, believes in segregation. If you read his editorials and those of his son-in-law, Lee Anderson, who succeeded him, who's now in a nursing home in Atlanta, they felt that the government, their argument always was like Schoolfield's, this is a matter for the states. It should not be for the federal government. And
right, Schoolfield was a Jeffersonian conservative, you could say, kind of an agrarian, pro-Southern sort of, right? Is that fair to say he was a Jeffersonian politic?
David, he had a benevolent attitude. I'll talk about the blacks. The blacks loved him, and even later on, after Brown versus Board of Education, and
they loved him even though he used the N word routinely. That was how he described black people.
That was part of his vocabulary,
right.
and
his whole life.
And after when they decided to, Clement up and decided to get indicted, but pressed a great lawyer over in Jack Norman in Nashville, and who hired for political reasons as his assistants, the late, great
John J. Hooker
Jr., whose father was a big colleague of the governor also. But anyway, they got what they did. They sent an investigator down here for about a year, and they got a bunch of stuff that was very minute, but they took it, presented it to Clement. Clement says, I'm going to present this, call out for an impeachment trial. Well, back in those days, you didn't have all these these boards. you had an impeachment. The only way you could impeach somebody would be to file it before the Tennessee General Assembly. And you would present the impeachment to the House. If they felt there was grounds for impeachment, like an indictment in criminal court, then the Senate would try you before their 33 members. And basically that's what happened. Ironically, by this time, Schoolfield had already been defeated for re-election by criminal judge, by Campbell Carden, who was a former FBI agent and also a former law school classmate of Richard Nixon over at Duke. And so basically what you had was they called it up, and Schoolfield had lost the election pretty handily. And, all he was going to do was going to remove him from office for a period of 3 months.
You mean the impeachment?
The impeachment. And he could run again if he wanted to. But why? And one thing I've never understood, and I've never been able to get an answer as to why didn't you just settle this thing? It's only going to cost you about 3 months of pay. And he wouldn't do that.
We're talking with Jerry Summers. This is David Toulis. Would you thank you for tuning in? The number is 800-8949, 800-8949. You report in The World Decides, the book. Well, there are 2 books, actually, with distinct titles: Rush to Justice, Tennessee's Forgotten Trial of the Century, Schoolfield, 1958, by Jerry Summers, the attorney here, my guest. And the second volume, about half the size, very sturdy hardback books, published by Walden Publishing. Walden Publishing, I think which may have done just one of John Wilson's books also. But the second volume is called Schoolfield, Out of the Ashes, 1958 to 1982. And we're hearing about how this criminal court judge here in Hamilton County created so many enemies and had people who were just dead set against him, Jerry Summers. Now, there were 31 charges that were proposed, and he was tried on, they weren't all put before the Senate after the impeachment, but there were 24 that ended up being reserved for a trial that went how long, Jerry?
About 6 weeks.
6 weeks with 81 witnesses, including people such as reporter Julius Parker, who at the time, was a reporter who later became the city editor at the Times Free Press. When I was hired by Lee Anderson as an editor, Julius Parker was there on the city desk, just next to the copy desk. I was a copy editor. And there were 81 witnesses. Who were some of the other witnesses that were either for or against?
Well, you had the most famous
Schoolfield?
one would have been Bobby Kennedy, who there was a story about when this case was under investigation. And that's really the genesis of these charges, was that there was an alleged bribe arising out of some Teamster violence on the picket line. And there was an allegation that about $25,000 had been paid to fix the case. Well, ironically, the funny thing about it is that the cases were equally divided between Schoolfield in Division 1 and Judge L.D. Miller in Division 2. Well, they both ruled the same. The cases came up, and it was charged, and Schoolfield ruled, and so did Judge Miller, that there was no jurisdiction of the case, and both of them threw the cases out. Well, that's last year.
Well, hold on just a second there, Jerry Summers. How is it that you have an alleged union violence in the county? How can a Hamilton County criminal court judge not have jurisdiction?
Well, they would. Well, it was saying that the law didn't apply. I didn't say the court didn't have jurisdiction. They said that the law did not apply in regard to this particular factual situation.
And we have a phone call. This is David Toulis, and you're live with me and Jerry Summers, attorney, author. What's on your mind? This is David Toulis, and what else is next? Okay, so there were 2 judges. They both ruled the same way in
and nothing was ever done to investigate Judge Miller.
Okay,
so they zeroed in on Schoolfield, and Schoolfield they proceeded to get these charges, and they came back in June 1st, I think, or June the 5th, and he'd already been defeated. And they up and tried him. And originally, there was actually 3 charges had been dismissed by the...
Now, we're talking about the impeachment trial?
The impeachment trial.
Before the Senate.
There have been three charges have been dismissed by the House. So ultimately, there was 21 charges he went to trial on. They went on for 6 weeks, and he ultimately was found guilty of 3 minor charges. Those 3 charges was, one, that he cussed out an assistant district attorney over at a private club called the Elks Club, right across the street from the courthouse, because he had already told he was having lunch, and he told the assistant DA, "I've refused to sign that. I'm not going to sign it now," and then tell him take it and stick it where the sun didn't shine. The second thing was that his court officer got a little overzealous, Schoolfield had an old broken down car that broke down about every day. So the court officer, unbeknown to Schoolfield, went out and raised about $3,000 and bought him a 1950 Pontiac. They said that he should not have accepted that, even though when he found out, he gave most of the money back. The third charge which one that if he was any semblance of him being guilty, would be the fact that he engaged in partisan politics. Well, Schoolfield was a yellow dog Democrat. He always was engaged in every race. And back in those days, the first rule.
What does yellow dog Democrat mean, Jerry Summers?
Well, conservative and basically believe in states' rights. And I think that's about the best I can describe it. I don't think there's many of them around anymore.
If my listeners are yellow dog Democrat, from what I've heard, that means that he would vote for a yellow dog if it was a Democrat. He's so party oriented. That was the allegation that they put on it. That they would do that. Well, this is Jerry talking with Jerry Summers, an attorney who's written a 2-volume set on a local notable with a torrid legal and political career. His name is Raulston Schoolfield, and we'll be back in just a minute. The name is David Toulis, and now I've got some important messages. Be right back.
3, 2, 1.
Chattanooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4. 92.7 FM's news now.
A head-on collision claimed the life of 33-year-old Veronica Romero Saturday. Traffic investigators say it happened on Dayton Boulevard when a Volkswagen Jetta driven by Miss Romero was hit head-on by a Kia that crossed the center line, driven by 26-year-old Carpio Brooks, who sustained serious injuries. Charges are pending against Mr. Brooks. Signal Mountain Boulevard shut down after a tree fell on a motorcyclist, shutting down power for a portion of Red Bank. The tree fell into an intersection, taking down with it power lines and blacking out EPB customers. The motorcyclist rushed to the hospital with serious injuries. And Teonte Rice was shot on Windsor Street Friday night. CPD confirms he was taken to Erlanger, where he was later pronounced dead. Major Crimes Unit is investigating. If you have information on who fired the fatal shots, give the CPD a call. You can remain anonymous. Belle St. John for Nooga Radio, News Talk 92.7, Action News now.
Chattanooga Morning News with Russ and Val. Weekdays from 6 to 9 a.m. on Nooga Radio, 92.7 FM.
Cash, 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 and more cash. Get 8.1% return on your money. Rick Davis can turn your cash into real money. Gold and silver bullion. American Eagle Gold. The banks give you a measly 1.9%. At Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds, you'll get 8.1% return on your money. 8.1% return on your money. Wow! Whether you're buying an ounce or 100 ounces, Rick guarantees it in writing. 8.1% Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds. Brainerd Road, Chattanooga.
Let's face it, Old Faithful isn't as faithful as it used to be. Constant repairs are a hassle and can rack up quick in money and time. Landers McClarty Ford can fix that. Right now, you can get a 2016 Ford Focus, 34,000 miles, only $11,491. A 2017 Chevy Spark with only 17,000 miles for less than $12,000. A 2015 Volkswagen Jetta with less than 21,000 miles for $11,991. Yeah, browse their entire inventory of new and new-to-you cars, trucks, and SUVs online at Landers McCarty Ford of FortPayne.com. Landers McClarty Ford of Fort Payne. If you can't find your next perfect ride, they'll go find it for you. Big city selection, small town prices, friendly service, and top dollar for your trade. The savings are waiting and only a short drive away, so what are you waiting for? Get started with your personalized shopping today at Landers McClarty Ford of FortPayne.com.
Join Nooga Radio and the Gridiron Gang live from 7 to 9 at Starbucks at 10 North on the North Shore. We're talking all things high school football. There's a specialty brew or refresher weekly inspired by the game of the week. Sweet treats, extended hours all season long, and we're pet friendly. Portions of all proceeds support local schools and educational scholarships as well as after-school programs. It's football time in Tennessee. Join us every Thursday live from 7 to 9 at Starbucks, 10 North, your North Shore neighborhood living room.
Your home is a constant work in progress. Repaint the walls? Yeah, easy enough. Leaky faucet? There's a video for that. But roof repair? You might want some help. That's where Chattanooga Roofing Contractors come in. They have 3 generations of roofing excellence you can count on. Leave the ladder in the garage. Go to chatroofing.com. That's chatroofing.com for Chattanooga Roofing Contractors, a roofing company you can trust.
It's
that time of year again. For the 7th year, Wings Over North Georgia Air Show will be Saturday, October the 13th, and Sunday, October the 14th. You'll see some of our government's finest assets flying in the world today. The rarely seen Air Combat F-22 Raptor demo team and the A-10 Warthog will both headline the show, along with Tora Tora Tora, which is the reenactment of Pearl Harbor to include pyrotechnics. Patty Wagstaff and Michael Goulian, both world aerobatic champions, will be showing off their amazing skills, along with numerous other aviation rock stars. On the ground, you'll be able to experience military static displays and even have an opportunity to ride in a Huey or Cobra helicopter. Wings Over North Georgia is an action-packed way to spend the weekend with your family. You can even camp on the grounds. The Richard B. Russell Regional Airport is the place for all the action on October the 13th and the 14th. For tickets and camping reservations, visit wingsovernorthgeorgia.com.
Man, you sure you know what you're doing?
Yeah, I worked with my dad on his truck all the time. Just one more bolt to go.
Yeah, wrong bolt. Today's truck ain't your daddy's truck. For repairs on today's vehicles, you need Amco Transmission and Total Car Care of Chattanooga on Lee Highway. Stay on the road, not in the garage. Amco Transmission on Lee Highway. Get it done the right way. The Thompson Pet way. Yeah, I just put that anywhere.
Join We've Got You Covered with Scott Schrader every Saturday from 10 to 11 on Nuga Radio. From finance to fixtures, we discuss everything you need to know about buying or owning a home, the pitfalls, the perks, and everything in between. Saturday mornings, 10 to 11, right here on Nuga Radio.
Nuga Radio, Chattanooga weather.
We expect partly sunny and warm weather out there through your afternoon. Can't rely on a spotty shower passing through, but not many. Highs into the lower 80s. Tonight, lows only 65 to 67. For Tuesday, partly cloudy, back into the lower 80s with more sunshine and even warmer weather for the midweek. Tired of the pressures and hassles of car shopping? Come see what more people are making the short drive to Jackson Chevrolet Buick GMC in Lafayette or online at jacksongm.com. That's Jackson Chevy Buick GMC in Lafayette. And I'm Soar Jean 12. She's meteorologist at your 4.
Nuga Radio 92.7.
Now, the smartest guy with a bow tie in Chattanooga, Tennessee, David Toulis.
I argue for near over far, small over big, simple over complex, and in the details at 5-point type in Helvetica font, the neutral Swiss font. Personal is better than corporate, and physical is better than abstract. The number is 800-8949. That's 800-8949. We're looking at a very unusual man right now. His name is Raulston Schoolfield. And for our viewer on Facebook, where we are live, of course, at Nuga Radio, you can see his picture. He's a kind of a cocky fella with a hat on, and the picture I'm holding up for the webcam has him with his chin up, as he was often seen doing. He had kind of a personal tick, but he had kind of a kind of an ostrich appearance. His head swiveling on a long neck. He looked very proud and sort of conceited, but he was a man with a very humble interest, because he defended the poor and defended a lot of black people. He was beloved of black people in Chattanooga. Now he fills 2 volumes of a new set by a local attorney, Jerry Summers, who's 77 years old and spending a little bit less time on active cases, such as the Rosemary DeCosimo case, which is the law firm is seeking an appeal to the high court. You're petitioning for a writ of certiorari, Jerry, is that right?
Yes.
And so that's a live case. He's retreating slightly from at 77 from the hot and heavy daily routines in the law firm to write. And the book is about Raulston Schoolfield. And the first volume, which is the main volume, is called Rush to Justice: Tennessee's Forgotten Trial of the Century. Schoolfield, 1958, about an impeachment trial of a rough and tumble judge. He was beloved by the poor and the black man, even though by common usage he called all blacks the N-word, but he didn't like them. But he kind of lost some ground among progressives by taking the state's right position after the Brown versus Board of Education, and saying, well, we can't have integration and we don't want the feds in here telling us what to do. And so he was a very controversial figure, always getting into trouble. And Jerry Summers, I noticed in your book that you use the expression Schoolfield threw gasoline on the fire. And you use that expression several times, because that's apparently what he did Raulston Schoolfield as a criminal court judge and a politician was always generating enemies.
Well, he never took the easy way out. And I'll give you an example. I mentioned previously about Bobby Kennedy being the book. Well, Bobby Kennedy was the was a counsel to the Senate hearing committee that in Washington that was investigating violence by Teamsters in 5 southern states. Well, Tennessee was the last one to come up, and it came up, and they decided Bobby Kennedy was asking questions, and they felt like there was this issue raised that whether Schoolfield, and it was never proved that he had taken some money, $25,000, to fix some cases, picket line violence cases in Chattanooga, which he had part of, and Judge L.D. Miller had the others. But basically, Kennedy decided that he would call Judge Schoolfield and invite him to come up and testify. Well, if they'd have subpoenaed him, it would give Schoolfield certain rights that he wouldn't have if he'd come voluntarily. So this story was told me by his family. They said one Sunday night, they were there watching one of Chattanooga's 1 or 2 TV stations, and the phone rang, and his son picked up the phone and said, "Daddy, there's a Bobby Kennedy on the line wants to speak to you." And Bobby Kennedy and Carter Schoolfield, Raulston's son, was within hearing distance, and Bobby Kennedy in his Massachusetts drawl, if you call it that, said, "Judge Schoolfield, this is Bobby Kennedy, and we think you need to come to Washington and to attempt to clear up these charges about you taking this bribe." And Schoolfield, as usual, you said throwing gasoline on the fire. Schoolfield listened for a minute, and he said, "Mr. Kennedy, thank you for calling. When I need a lawyer, I'll call you," and hung up the phone. Well, that was some more gasoline on the fire, and he was always doing things like that. He was very abrupt, and he let you know very quickly where he stood. Now, you talked about his relationship with the blacks, and I'll tell you a story about this. Is told a real factual case about City Judge Russell Bean. And Russell, when he got out of law school, he was still young during the Schoolfield raid, and he first day out, he went to his daddy, gave him a file and said, "Go up and hear this case." And so he goes up there, and it was a black man, and what happened, his landlord had evicted him, and Russell was up there, looked in there, saw Judge Schoolfield, and he tried to talk his client, his elderly black gentleman, up, and he said, "Oh, we don't need to hear this before Judge Schoolfield." He says, "Why?" He said, "Well, you know how he's come out against integration?" And the black man said, "I'll take Judge Schoolfield. He'll be fair to me." So they went in there, and he was fair to him. He ruled for the elderly black tenant, assessed all the costs against the landlord, and told him to write a check right then for all those for him damages. So he had a benevolent. His was a benevolent attitude towards blacks. I'll tell you another story. I told you in the first part about him and Frank Clement didn't get along. And there's a lawyer now, Governor Frank Clement, and there's a lawyer here now still practicing, Brad Weeks. His father was a very close friend of Frank Gold Clement, and they went to National Guard every year. And everyone knows that Governor Clement liked some Tennessee bourbon, and so did Brad Weeks, his father. And he said that every year he would come back from National Guard camp because Clement during the Korea, he didn't go into Korea. He was assigned to National Guard and stayed here. So anyway, he came home, and his dad would just tell about how Clement would cuss Schoolfield, how sorry he was, and crooked. Well, then Brad Weeks went to law school and became a lawyer. And he started out like young lawyers are. They were given the sessions court, the lower court cases. And so his dad said, "We're going up here and try this."
Defense, they're defending.
Right, go up here and try this case up in sessions court. Well, Brad went up there, opened the door again like what Judge Bean had done, Judge Russell Bean, and saw his Schoolfield. He got all panicky and so forth. But he went in there and he started trying his case. And he said it went fine. He said, he's going to jump all over me because he knows how much my dad and Governor Clement hated him. And he said, well, he closed his case. And before he started making his argument, Judge Schoolfield motioned to him to come up to the bench. And he said, "Son, why don't you go ask for your attorney's fees?" And Brad never forgot that. And to this day, he'll tell you how much. And Brad practiced a lot, does a lot of work in Sessions Court during the 8 years Schoolfield's on the bench. and he will tell you with what high respect he had for Raulston Schoolfield. The situation was, when in his younger days, older judges were not good to Raulston Schoolfield. And as a result, he never forgot that. And he said, I was, older judges took care of me, and I'm going to try to take care of myself. So that's just the two sides of the guy. Of course, he always had the support of the Ku Klux Klan. He didn't belong to the Klan. He was very supportive of the White Citizens Council, which, as you know, is what would be the White Citizens Council tried to do in nonviolence by economic sanctions and keep blacks from getting the right to vote and get in business. And he was a big speaker for them. And he represented, after he even got impeached, he represented John Casper up in the bombing of the school up there in Clinton, Tennessee, which was a famous case. And Raulston represented him. Well, what's meant to me to believe that if he had just laid off after he had been impeached, because they failed to pass a motion to disqualify him from ever serving in public office by one vote. And if he had just backed off of that, I think that but no, typical Schoolfield action. He said, Casper needs a lawyer, and I'm going to be his lawyer. So that continued. And then going on to book 2, what happened is that the Bar Association, the Tennessee and Chattanooga Bar Association, filed articles of taking away his law license. And they appointed a judge who had been appointed by a chancellor from over in Middle Tennessee, who had been appointed by Frank Clemens. And they had a trial. The Schoolfield put on 31 character witnesses. And the only evidence they let to be put on was the fact that the Bar Association introduced the transcript of the impeachment trial. And they said Schoolfield could show anything good character. Well, the chancellor found him, disbarred him, and this resulted in several appeals. You couldn't appeal from the impeachment trial, the first one, but one of his lawyers was Justice Ray Brock, who was also himself elevated to the Tennessee Supreme Court, became chancellor, and but they lost all those appeals. But then the other part of the story is how Schoolfield got to run for judge, even though he was impeached and disbarred lawyers.
He ran in Hamilton County as a non-lawyer judge, right? Because he had lost his license.
1974, there was a loophole in the law that a private act up in Knox County said that you could be a non-lawyer judge if you fit within the population window. Well, about that time, Hamilton County grew into that population window, and so he could run on that. And when he did, he ran and he led the ticket. And then everybody was worried about how he was going to be as a judge for the next 8 years. And he had one rule. He would not hear any cases involving Jack Chambliss's firm, because he said, I can't win one way or the other. If I rule for him, they'll think I'm sucking up to him. If they rule against me, I rule against him, he'll say that I'm it's just bitterness over the impeachment.
Well, this impeachment in Nashville went for 5 weeks. There were 81 witnesses, including reporters who testified, and you mentioned in your book that it takes 130 discs to keep all the records. Many of the print, the Times Free Press and Times clippings are in your book. Jerry Summers giving it a bit of the heft that it has. Now, was this trial that found him guilty on 3 charges in 1958 political or legal? Because strict legal standards for a criminal trial, rules of evidence and so on, didn't really apply there. What kind of trial was this for the impeachment?
Well, Dave, it's kind of like what's going on in Washington now with Kavanaugh. It's certainly political aspects, non-criminal in Kavanaugh, and non-criminal in Schoolfield either. It was strictly a political trial, and it was the last one ever held by the Tennessee General Assembly. And I will tell you, it was so popular. Mort Lord, the late husband of now deceased Congresswoman Mary Lord, had a flying service, and he would fly, work for Channel 12. He would fly to Nashville every morning, hear the trial, and give 2 or 3 brief interviews over the phone, and then he would come back, and at his 6 o'clock news, he would summarize what the events of the day. It was broadcast at nighttime, and the radio stations would play it back. And I've talked to some people, and they said we were glued. It was not quite like Roosevelt's fireside chats, but it was certainly very important, because Schoolfield always had a 10 or 15,000 people that would have voted for him, no matter what the circumstances or evidence was.
Was he a Democrat?
He was a Democrat.
Okay. And what were his how would you have distinguished his political views in as far as local government goes and law from, let's say, the Republican Party at that time, which I guess would have been the Jack Chambliss perspective? What was the difference between them practically in local politics?
Well, you got to bear in mind, Jack Chambliss represented insurance companies and hospitals and the power structure in Tennessee. Raulston Schoolfield represented the little people, and the way they used to describe people like Jack Chambliss was a silk stocking lawyers, and the Schoolfield's clients, he would be defined as a cotton sock lawyer. But that would be one difference. He was very conservative, and he got elected to the Hamilton County, what's now the council, but he got elected and served one term there and then did something else. He ran numerous times after 1958 until he was appointed in 1974, was elected to the bench in 74. And he also was reelected in 1982 and in September, and then, of course, a month later, he died under some controversy by the newspapers. The Nashville Tennessean reported that on his death, there had been an event that night, if you recall, it's called the Love of Chattanooga, the Dorothy Patton series, and he had been there that night, sitting with Dalton Roberts, Judge Sam Payne, two of the other people, never had a drink, got up, went home, laid down, and had a heart attack and died. Well, the Nashville Tennessean, which had always fought him, said, Raulston's controversial, impeached, and disbarred criminal judge Raulston Schoolfield died last night after a night of partying in a local nightclub. Well, that incensed Dalton Roberts to the extent that he wrote a letter to the Tennessean asking that they rescind that. And, of course, they never answered. So I guess the bottom thing and thought that I closing the book out is that even in death, Raulston Schoolfield was controversial, just like he was during his entire life.
Well, how would you describe his politics, though? He was not, when Brown versus Board of Education came down saying that public schools had to be integrated by force, he took the side for states' rights, which put him sort of against the common black man's interests, I would say. What other things were part of his philosophy? He was a Jeffersonian conservative. He was, in other words, favoring decentralized government. But what about in local politics? What were things notable about how he saw the world?
One of the things that got him in trouble is that he and Corey Smith, the DA, were very, very bitter enemies. And Raulston would throw out cases. And the thing about it is he was very seldom held to be wrong. But what he did is he would just abruptly throw the case out. If he could just sit there and take it up a little bit more time and done it. But
would he throw the case out apart from emotion?
He would throw it out on emotion.
Okay.
Sometimes he would say, I don't think there's enough evidence this case should go to the jury. I'm going to grant a directed verdict. And that got him in trouble. And that gave him ammunition that they were trying to build this idea.
How often was he wrong, Jerry Summers, in these sudden decisions? All right, this case is bad, I'm throwing it out. Was he often overruled?
Not very often, but most of the time he was right. He was a very smart fella. And a lot of times back in those days, the DA's office was not as prepared as they should be, and there would be gaps in their cases, and he would up and, he was reversed on a few occasions. I didn't go into every one of his cases, but I did tell you that he was not a bad judge.
This is David Toulis, and you're talking with Jerry Summers. What's on your mind?
Oh, and really, what really drives me crazy, other than just about everything, when I hear somebody say states' rights, because and I know lawyers do it, and conservatives, and I'm a conservative, but states don't have rights. They have denied powers under Article 1, Section 10. And the federal government has limited powers granted under Article 1, Section 8. So, and the 14th Amendment has guaranteed equal protection of the law. And that's federal. That's the Constitution. So when somebody in the state says, we're going to treat somebody different than another person because of their race, religion, color, sexual orientation, whatever it is, and they're getting money from that entity, you can't do that. It's common sense. It's just absolute common sense. There are state rights involved.
Well, that's my
rights.
All right, that's my expression. What is your question? or comment?
I want to hear a response. I'm just making a statement. I'd like to hear.
Okay, so Jerry Summers, the question is states' rights a proper term to use, which was something that came up here a moment ago?
Well, it was during the time of the Schoolfield era, and it was time of the Constitution. When they drew up the Constitution, it was supposed to, states' rights was much stronger, and the people were afraid of a strong central government. You talk about the forefathers that drew this up, Jefferson and so forth, but that is gradually over the course of years, and a lot of it's blamed on the Warren Court, and a lot of it that the Brown versus Board of Education was something that was indicated that states' rights was being pushed to the side. And it's been a revolution that's taken place over the years, but I would have to say that that's probably the biggest example of what would be a reduction. The federal government is now into everything just about.
Right, the states are mere administrative offices.
Right, and they hold out the the federal government holds out the carrot of money, and all states have always got their hand out for the money for the roads. You got a state puts up 10%, the government puts, and the federal government puts up, and you don't get that, and you get in the situation. A big area is about all the money that's involved in driving under the influence cases, which is how that there's something like close to $800 million that are distributed to the states if you will impose certain prohibitions. And whether that's right or wrong, I don't need to get into.
Okay, caller, what comment or question?
That's why I didn't ask a question, because I understand all this, and I'm against the federal government intruding upon the states. But one of the reasons they intrude upon the states is because, first of all, the states call it states' rights. It's not. The federal government has limited powers. If people don't understand how the Constitution works, it'll work against them. And it was the first court that attempted to destroy the Constitution, saying the Constitution is whatever the Supreme Court says it is. Well, it isn't. The Constitution is what it says it is. And the federal government has gone way beyond their bounds, but there's no such thing as states' rights. It doesn't exist. Rights come from God to people. States are denied power.
States have authority, and it's
so
limited.
Different now than it was when it was drafted. It's the occupiers that occupy offices to diminish the meaning of the words.
Okay, thanks very much, Mike, for calling. We're talking with Jerry Summers, and this is David Toulis. We're at 92.7 FM, Nougat Radio. Make sure you go to my GoFundMe page. David Toulis Show wants to pay its way here at the station. So Jerry Summers, my listener, can get a copy of your book. It's called Rush to Justice, and you're suggesting that they simply call your office, which is Summers, Ruffalo, and Rogers Law Firm. It's in the James Building downtown.
That's correct. It's 265-2385. It's the first book is Out of the Ashes, which covers his birth. Rush to Justice covers his birth from 1906 up to 1958, and then Schoolfield Out of the Ashes covers from 1958 to 1982. They're $34.99 each, or both for $65 plus sales tax and shipping. If you want to come by the office, you'll save $9 on it, and I'll be glad to sign it for you. That may reduce the value of it, my signature, when you take it out to McKay's. But I think it's a great book. It's a
Jerry Summers, and thank you so much for joining us, David.
3, 2, 1.
Chattanooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4. 92.7 FM's news. Now.
A head-on collision claimed the life of 33-year-old Veronica Romero Saturday. Traffic investigators say it happened on Dayton Boulevard when a Volkswagen Jetta driven by Miss Romero was hit head-on by a Kia that crossed the center line, driven by 26-year-old Carpio Brooks, who sustained serious injuries. Charges are pending against Mr. Brooks. Signal Mountain Boulevard shut down after a tree fell on a motorcyclist, shutting down power for a portion of Red Bank. The tree fell into an intersection, taking down with it power lines and blacking out EPB customers. The motorcyclist rushed to the hospital with serious injuries. And Teonte Rice was shot on Windsor Street Friday night. CPD confirms he was taken to Erlanger, where he was later pronounced dead. Major Crimes Unit is investigating. If you have information on who fired the fatal shots, give the CPD a call. You can remain anonymous. Belle St. John for Nougat Radio, News Talk 92.7, Action News Now.
Sean Hannity, weekday afternoons from 3 to 6 p.m. on Nougat Radio 92.7 FM.
Nougat Radio 92.7. Nougat Radio, Chattanooga weather.
Sunset, partly sunny and warm weather out there through your afternoon. Can't rule out a spotty shower passing through, but not many. Highs into the lower 80s. Tonight, lows only 65 to 67. For Tuesday, partly cloudy, back into the lower 80s with more sunshine and even warmer weather for the midweek. Tired of the pressures and hassles of car shopping? Come see what more people are making the short drive to Jackson Chevrolet Buick GMC in Lafayette or online at jacksongm.com. That's Jackson Chevy Buick GMC in Lafayette. And I'm Soar Gene 12, Chief Meteorologist at your core.
My ex recently hacked my email and my social media, and it really caused me some problems. I changed all my passwords, which helped, but I'm still getting trolled, maybe even stalked. I know it's him. I just can't prove it.
My business, well, it's been broken into twice already. I've got cameras, but that only helps after the fact. I'd rather prevent it from happening in the first place.
Unity One East is your solution to these and many other security concerns. With private investigation, security services, and backed by decades of real-life experience in military and law enforcement, Unity One East is your instant contact for security, investigation, and consultation to help protect you, your family, and your business. No 1-800 number, no red tape, no wait, because Unity One East is local and available 24/7. Reclaim your peace of mind. Call Unity One East, 475-6206, 475-6206.
Call 423-875-3600 if you're looking to expand your professional look of your business. Then consider the vast opportunities that are available when you locate your office with the Raines Group family. Remember, it's location, location, location. And the Raines Group has the location for your professional office. Check out the spaces for lease at Executive Business Park on the Lee Highway. Small or large, we will be able to suit your needs with the Raines Group. Call 423-875-3600 for the business professionals with the Raines Group.
Nuga Radio. Are you brain dead? Still voting for pathetic liberals? Take 3 hours of Sean Hannity from 3 to 6.
Nuga Radio.
Then call us in the morning between 9 and 11.
92.7
Nuga Radio. WPLZ HD4 Ottawa, W224AZ Chattanooga.
Serving Chattanooga.
Broadcasting live from the center of the universe, the Tennessee Valley's most listened to news talk station.
Nuga Radio 92.7.
This is CBS News on the Hour, sponsored by ZipRecruiter.
I'm Jim Shenevy. The Supreme Court began its new term today with 8 justices, as the nomination of Brett Kavanaugh to the High Court remains in limbo amid the sex assault allegations against him and the FBI investigation of those allegations. It was a hot topic at President Trump's morning news conference.
The president's dismissing criticism from Democrats that the scope of the probe is too limited. He says it's up to the Senate, not him, to determine what the FBI investigates.
I think the FBI should interview anybody that they want within reason.
Mr. Trump also says he doesn't think Kavanaugh lied or mischaracterized his drinking habits.
I can tell you, I watched that hearing, and I watched a man saying that he did have difficulty as a young man with drink.
Steve Dorsey, CBS News, Washington.
President Trump has reached a deal on that reworked North American Free Trade Agreement with Canada and Mexico.
The agreement will govern nearly $1.2 trillion in trade, which makes it the biggest trade deal in the United States history.
Canada, which had been playing hardball on trade with the U.S., is describing the deal as a victory, which maintains tariff-free access for the majority of Canadian exports. President Trump says he's not all that confident that Congress will ratify the deal, saying it might reject it for political reasons. Services today in Las Vegas marking the anniversary of the concert shooting that left 58 people dead. Clark County Sheriff Joe Lombardo.
We learned that we are not defined by our fears, but by our will to overcome them. A calm was brought to chaos, and a generous outpouring of support restored our sense that we're more good in the world than there is bad.
Several hundred people attending that sunrise ceremony, including survivors, families of victims, and the first responders. The Nobel Prize for Medicine was handed out today to American James Allison and Japan's Tasuku Hanjo for their research into ways the immune system can be manipulated to fight cancer. Allison's work focused on proteins that act as brakes on the immune system.
I'm a basic scientist. I did not get into these studies to try to cure cancer. I got into them because I wanted to know how T cells work.
In New York,
Cardi, do you regret going after the girls' party?
rapper Cardi B charged with assault related to a fight at a Queens strip club back in August. Her spokesman said there's no evidence that she caused anyone any harm, and they expect the matter to be resolved expeditiously. Emergency services officials says a man taking a selfie along the flooded Potomac River fell into the Great Falls and survived. The man suffered some serious injuries. On Wall Street, the Dow is up 182. This is CBS News.
ZipRecruiter, the smartest way to hire. ZipRecruiter's technology finds qualified candidates for businesses of all sizes. Try it for free at ZipRecruiter.com/free.
Till the tears run down from my eyes, Lord, somebody, ooh, somebody, can anybody find me? Somebody to love.
Alexa, play hits from Queen.
Okay.
Somebody to love.
With Amazon Music, a voice is all you need. Get tens of millions of songs. Download the Amazon Music app today.
Right now, the Kohler Cimarron Comfort Height Elongated Toilet is at its lowest price at the Home Depot, just $199. You save $50. At that price, you can raise your expectations, but leave your budget exactly where it is. And the best news of all, it's a Kohler. They never compromise. Why should you? Start with the best. The Kohler Cimarron Comfort Height Toilet, just $199 now at the #1 Kohler retailer, the Home Depot. More saving, more doing. Valid through October 28th.
A new breast cancer awareness campaign featuring a topless Serena Williams.
I love myself. Serena Williams looks straight into the camera, which slowly pulls back to show her topless, covering her breasts with her hands. Filming it took her out of her comfort zone, the star tweets, but she did it to push more women to get screened. Think I would die if you were to ignore me. Vicky Barker, CBS News.
According to a recent federal report, the Drug Enforcement Administration is expanding a nationwide surveillance network that combines those speed signs and license plate readers. Ostensibly, it's designed to keep tabs on suspected drug runners and is focused on high drug and money trafficking corridors, but privacy advocates are concerned. Jim Shenevy, CBS News.
I used to post to job boards that sent me...
3, 2, 1. Chattanooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4. 92.7 FM's news now.
2 men arrested after an early morning murder. Arecion Lane was shot to death early Saturday morning. The cops found him on East 3rd Street when a shots fired call was made. The reports say a juvenile was arrested. He admitted to killing the victim. And another suspect, Ladarian Lane, was taken into custody too. Another shooting in Chattanooga. Deontay Rice was shot on Windsor Street Friday night. The Chattanooga Police Department confirms he was taken to Erlanger, where he was pronounced dead. The Major Crimes Unit still investigating, trying to find a suspect. A major drug smuggling operation was busted up in Middle Tennessee. One of the arrested racketeers was a kindergarten teacher. Reports say 50-year-old Shelley Gerda arrested. She taught at the Stewartsboro Elementary School in Smyrna. Investigators say she worked with others to smuggle drugs into the Rutherford County Jail. Russell Stroud, Nooga Radio News Talk 92.7 Action News now.
Nooga Radio, Chattanooga weather.
Expect partly sunny and warm weather out there through your afternoon. Can't rule out a spotty shower passing through, but not many. Highs into the lower 80s. Tonight, lows only 65 to 67. For Tuesday, partly cloudy, back into the lower 80s with more sunshine and even warmer weather for the midweek. Tired of the pressures and hassles of car shopping? Come see what more people are making the short drive to Jackson Chevrolet Buick GMC in Lafayette or online at jacksongm.com. That's Jackson Chevy Buick GMC in Lafayette. And I'm Sorgene 12, Chief Meteorologist at your 4.
Nooga Radio 92.7.
Listen to that. That's the sound of power and the call of the open road. That's the sound of the newly designed 2019 Indian Chieftain Limited. Yeah, Indian. It's more than a bike. It's an experience and an American icon. The place to find it, Indian Motorcycle of Chattanooga, along with their entire new 2019 line. The open road is calling. Answer the call. Go to Indian Motorcycle of Chattanooga. Just look for the sign on 153 and Amnicola. Indian Motorcycle, the true American original.
Join We've Got You Covered with Scott Schrader every Saturday from 10 to 11 on Nuga Radio. From finance to fixtures, we discuss everything you need to know about buying or owning a home, the pitfalls, the perks, and everything in between. Saturday mornings, 10 to 11, right here on Nuga Radio.
If you want to discover the real hope for your life through inspirational music, relevant messages, and testimonies from others who have already found hope, then we encourage you to visit the second annual My Hope Conference, October 7th through 9th at Hickson First Baptist Church. Free admission and childcare is provided for kids up to pre-K, while those in kindergarten through 5th grade will attend the Kids Hope Rally. For more info, visit myhopeconference.com or call Hickson First Baptist Church at 423-877-2467.
Sean Hannity, weekday afternoons from 3 to 6 p.m. on Nuga Radio 92.7 FM.
Nuga Radio 92.7.
Now, the smartest guy with a bow tie in Chattanooga, Tennessee, David Toulis.
David Toulis, you're a proponent for the free movement of people. You're a critic here against human trafficking. That is something I'm very concerned about, human trafficking, which is to say trafficking over long-time sexual servitude lasting for 2 or 3 years among young girls lifted from foster care and put into the flesh markets, or trafficking by high and mighty ones for the night, which is sometimes referred to as arrest and booking. Human trafficking, where people are removed from their expectations of getting home for the night to wife or husband and loved ones, and taken instead before a magistrate, and then a cell, and then a chat with a bondsman, and then they are released. This is a kind of human trafficking, though it's so short term we don't think of it in terms of non-paid work or work in circumstances where your credentials are kept by the owner, the master, the man in charge of the work site, or the farm implements, and you are there stuck in a rented trailer with many companions, paying a huge rent, paid in cash, some kept on reserve so that your fees and fines can be paid as employee. That is human trafficking. That is also called slavery. And it's long-term, but there are short-term varieties of it. And I'd like you to suggest, as we consider Title 55 reform, that trafficking is a much larger problem. I got an email this morning from Constance Giles in Cohutta, Georgia, in Whitfield County, and she was trafficked by Angela Jessica Lowry, a sheriff's deputy serving that department on July 15. And so she's telling me by email, well, we're seeing Deputy Lowry and Deputy Fletcher at the games that my children take part in as part of the high school evening ritual across the country. That's a very common thing. And the trafficker, the deputy serving the public interest and public safety and security, they're making sure everything goes all right among the sports fans and students and parents at the football and basketball game. David Toulis here. We're brought to you by Nuganomics.com, the website for the man who matters. I am the blogger with the biggest pen, as that is my alternative output, right? My grace output. Also brought to you by Rooter Pros. Make sure you download the Next Radio app. And you can hear all of our shows, Sean Hannity at 3, and you can hear our early morning newscast with Russ and Val live in the morning, starting at 6 o'clock on your phone, as from the signal, as through the signal, not through streaming. Just think about that. That's called Next Radio, and just type in Nuga, make that your favorite smartphone, your smartphone. App, also on NugaRadio.com, online and live on Facebook, and also on YouTube. The name is David Toulis, and my argument is that you should love your neighbor and buy local. And there's going to be on Wednesday a Hamilton County Commission meeting that will be a first step for a new wastewater treatment plant. Now, that's a story that Mark Harrison, the executive director at WWTA, is pushing. It's the County Water and Wastewater Treatment Authority. It gets quite a bit of flack from the critics and the gadflies, you might say, that or who appear at City Council. Chris Dahl, for example. But the plan is for there to be a purchase of private property of 150 acres on Mahan Gap Road in Ottawa, Georgetown, and along Savannah Creek. And there's going to be built there a wastewater treatment plant north end of the county. Now, why is that happening at all? Well, there's growth out there. And there is a sub story that has the disconnected parts. I don't know how to connect the parts, but it is there through an analysis by Chuck Marone at strongtowns.org. Now, if you want to know the sub story, the deep structure story of American growth after World War II, there are several strands to follow. One is the paper money economy that began just before the First World War. In fact, that enabled the American entry into that war, the creation of the Federal Reserve System, the bankers' bank, the foundation of the fiat money scheme that today is completely fiat. There's a complete disconnect between the money, the currency, the medium of exchange, and real value, right? The bills pretend to be bills with legal language, suggesting that they give the holder a claim on some value elsewhere held by the issuer of the paper. But that's not the case anymore. These are just fiat paper notes. They are I owe you not some things, but I owe you nothings. That's one strand of the story, the paper money economy, that has to expand. There has to be a continuing expansion of the paper money scheme. And that's why businesses have to be in debt. You are a fool in a way to have the principle of honest money, the principle of using existing capital rather than making new capital through the fractional reserve banking process. You're foolish not to go to the magicians who make money from nothing, right? Who extend credit, as they say, that then once the loan is created, courses through the veins of the economy, local economy here in Chattanooga, buying services and goods, paying for brick, paying for bulldozer operator, dump truck operators, lumber suppliers, and all the rest who are helping you put up your yet one more apartment block downtown. Money that is dilutive of the buying power of all the other dollars that are already in the economy, and many of them, of course, most of them perhaps, having been created from nothing, that are simply the objects of or the creation of the lending process. So we have an economy that is debt-based and is facing, in my estimation, a dreadful correction, a loss of confidence. It is based on the confidence of people to repay me. And when that confidence is broken, it can falter on some minor detail, and a Bulgarian bank may have a problem, and suddenly we have a cataclysm in Wall Street and on Main Street as well. The other strands are what Chuck Marone calls the growth Ponzi scheme, the American Municipal Growth Ponzi scheme. And I can't, when I say I can't connect all the parts to it, what I'm saying is that the fault I have in my knowledge is that I'm not exactly sure how we can connect the larger narrative of the Ponzi scheme in American growth and the creation of suburbia and this particular vote. The county's going to be paying $3 million for property and closing costs, according to the Times Free Press, which has a staff report this morning. I'm looking at the online version of that. And Mark Harrison is the executive director, and we're hoping to find out more from him what the WWTA intends to do. The plan, of course, is a sewage plant. Will have possible neighborly complaints about odors and so on. But that is the plant is necessary given the premise of expansion and growth. And the problem that Marone identifies is that, well, in a nutshell, that we face a municipal disaster just ahead. And the reason is because with easy money, with intergovernmental payments, with a federally funded transportation system, we have easy access to capital, right? Which is to say debt. We can easily get into debt, which of course, when in the fun part, the beginning part is it's capital. It is money that we have now to spend. We are rich now. We have received grants and loans and things that are federal and have federal origin. But the problem is on the outside, on the back side of the creation of infrastructure, there is the maintenance and repair cost that is not in view. And it's not in view, and even our great ones. The smartest guy with a bow tie, of course, in Chattanooga is me. But there are others. There's Mr. Sammons, who is in the mayor's office, who gives reports occasionally before city council. There's also John Bridger, who Mr. Sammons, I think, is involved in purchasing. He's involved in purchasing equipment for the city and software and so on. Then there is John Bridger, who makes regular appearances before the city council, which, by the way, the city council is meeting now not at 6 p.m., but at 4 p.m. I believe that starts today. In fact, it does start today because I made note of it in my calendar. So I'll be, after my program, in God's good providence, zipping down to 1000 Lindsay Street downtown, a very lovely little street, by the way, where the city council has its front doors. And John Bridger, I say all that to get to John Bridger, who said he couldn't really explain to me where Chuck Marone's analysis fits into what's happening in Chattanooga. And I said, John, how can I figure out how this Ponzi scheme is working here? It is a Ponzi scheme. And if you're not sure what that is, maybe you can call me, or maybe someone else can call me and tell us what a Ponzi scheme is and how it might be in play here. Well, it is in play all across the country. And the problem is this, that when you have an expansion, you obtain free land. Let's say there's a wealthy family in Collegedale that has donated this land, the McKee family. So you have grants like that where builders, they grant you a road, right? They say, we built this road into a subdivision, and here now county government, city government, here's the road. We give it to you. Well, what's happening there is that the maintenance costs of that road are going to be on the public dime, right? You essentially have a road that goes on welfare, and at some point it's going to start needing to have the checks come in to pay for the holes and the repaving and the erosion problem that's putting cracks in the pavement and the like. That's all going to come on the public dime. So this giving of assets, of infrastructure assets to counties and cities creates a burden that it can't be paid. And I asked John, how do I nail this story down? He said, well, I don't think we can nail it down. And I asked one of his colleagues at the design studio, and she couldn't really tell me either. So these, of course, were just general conversations. I didn't have a specific thing I was asking for. So, but in general terms, no one really knows how this calculation is to be understood. But Marone at strongtowns.org says that it is a disaster ahead, a municipal disaster ahead. And it comes from having a low expense at the beginning, but a high maintenance expense for the next generation. And that's why he calls it the growth Ponzi scheme. And there's a series at strongtowns.org. I'm late in getting to it. I'm not always as current as I would like to be here. David Toulis, 800-8949, 800-8949. But I gave this series my strictest attention 3 Sundays ago, maybe 4 Sundays ago, when I read this in detail, and I marked up my copies, parts 1 through 5. And these writers, Marone's an engineer, and he's in the vein of Jane Jacobs and her classic work, her conservative free market oriented work, by the way, defending effectively the non-planning of cities, effectively defending the liberty of people in a city to plan the city and to not have a growth plan, because a growth plan implies certain things. The whole Thrive 2055 growth plan scheme presupposes the Ponzi scheme. And what Marone says is that the scheme will end in a black hole, a municipal black hole around the entire country. Detroit is not An anomaly, he says, it is simply first. That we have a Detroit ahead in Hamilton County. And why is that? Well, what do you want to hear the news, right? So there's a vote set Wednesday on this new wastewater plant. And I'm looking here at the TFP's account of that. The plant will be $45 million. And what's happened, according to Marone, what's happened across the country is that when you have a rather than a vertical growth of a city, you have a horizontal growth of a city. Okay. Now, in one sense, I'm all about horizontality. I'd say that politically and legally, if we have the fruit of Christianity in Chattanooga and Hamilton County, we have an increasingly horizontal society. You have horizontality in society. You don't have anybody over anybody else, right? Every man is before God directly. And there's no man over another man, right? You have fewer and fewer employment relationships, employer-employee relationships, right? Because there you have one man under another, and you have more and more contractual relationships among equals. So, say in your business you don't have employees, well, you have arrangements that are contractual, right? You have equals meeting together over a certain purpose, and no one sets hours. There's no withholding for FICA and the Medicare, Medicaid, that kind of thing. It is among equals where each man is his own boss. That is a free society, and the American heritage is all about contracting and mutual aid, mutual service, mutual respect. And employment came with the rise of the industrial era, and the first people to be employees were women and foreigners. They were the ones who were ready to be employees, but the hardy American would never have done it back in the 1840s, 1860s, 70s. That those people were not of the mind to work for anybody, right? They were independent operators. Now, the problem, I'm getting off track here. The problem of verticality, though, is in that context is what we don't want, and that's where you have people over you, people who can order you around. Right. In a free society, we are said to be a free people here in Tennessee. There is no one who can order you around. There just isn't. Unless, of course, you have entered into an equitable arrangement or a contract with that person and you do things by agreement. Right. So if you're involved in commerce on the road, you have to stop for the cop because you are bound to stop for him because he enforces the commercial statute and you're involved in commerce. Right. So you have to stop. You have to submit your license, your proof of insurance, and your registration of your car as a motor vehicle. That's all goes without saying because you are contractually bound because you're in commerce involved in a regulable activity. But generally, people are free and they can't be ordered about. That's why the police are a violence against the idea of a free state and a free people. The idea of police who can order you out, order you to roll your window down, order you to give your name. These are all things that are from a lost and pagan culture, right? That's your pagan empires all had officials who could do that, right? Their whim was your law, right? That we should find this very offensive and very appalling. We should find these police stories of the kind that I mention every now and then to be simply flabbergasting. We should say that can't be, that just cannot be. If we are a free people with constitutional rights, no one can order anybody around, period. It's all done by arrangement, right? If people are moved around, it is by agreement, by the marketplace, by free will, by negotiation, by treating among ourselves what we're going to do, how we're going to allocate resources, how we're going to spend our time, where stores will go up. Now, in the context though of the growth Ponzi scheme, we have horizontality which is a bad thing. It's a bad thing because it's been enabled by easy money, by the fiat money system, but by the central bank, by the federal government, and the states wanting to have federal money. And so what you've had a spreading of cities, which is extraordinarily inefficient, and has created, as Marone says, it creates it's financial unprofitability. It's unprofitable and not financially productive to expand horizontally, to keep adding new infrastructure, new bridges, new wastewater treatment plants out further and further out because we're growing, right? We're growing. We're all excited about growth. But is that the kind of growth that's really productive? The answer is no. It is not. It is not. productive. It'll be a $45 million bond issue, but the problem is that such constructions as this plant have a pitiful public yield. Okay, public yield is what? Well, what that means is tax revenue obtained per increment of liability assumed. So the county is going to assume huge liability to pay off the $45 million plus the interest, right, to the bondholders, and what you get some tax revenue from that by new subdivisions, new factories, new retail outlets built in the county further and further out away from the center of the city. And the yield is low. The tax revenue obtained per increment of liability assumed is very, very low. And the number that these researchers have come up with is that for every dime of revenue short term because of growth, right? Now you have to sit down for this, okay? And just sit down. And when you hear this, because we face, according to these analysts, we face a disaster ahead, and no one is making these calculations. No one is making this calculation. It hasn't been made. No one. It's not even part of the discussion before the county commission. The county commission has not asked this question, and does not know how to ask this question. Are you sitting down? Okay. For every dime of short-term revenue, you have $1 of outward year liability. So your revenues are not going to cover the out year, and no one is saving up money. There's no money being saved for the repair that this plant is going to be needing in 20 years. Right? 20 years, it's going to be falling apart. Where's the money to repair it? It doesn't exist. So what's happened is you have a wasted dollar, wasted tax revenues going into another project. David Toole, listening to radio.
3, 2, 1.
Chattanooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4. 92.7 FM's news now.
A head-on collision claimed the life of 33-year-old Veronica Romero Saturday. Traffic investigators say it happened on Dayton Boulevard when a Volkswagen Jetta driven by Miss Romero was hit head-on by a Kia that crossed the center line, driven by 26-year-old Carpio Brooks, who sustained serious injuries. Charges are pending against Mr. Brooks. Signal Mountain Boulevard shut down after a tree fell on a motorcyclist, shutting down power for a portion of Red Bank. The tree fell into an intersection, taking down with it power lines and blacking out EPB customers. The motorcyclist rushed to the hospital with serious injuries. And Deontay Rice was shot on Windsor Street Friday night. CPD confirms he was taken to Erlanger, where he was later pronounced dead. Major Crimes Unit is investigating. If you have information on who fired the fatal shots, give the CPD a call. You can remain anonymous. Val St. John for Nooga Radio, News Talk 92.7, Action News now.
Chattanooga Morning News with Russ and Val. Weekdays from 6 to 9 a.m. on Nooga Radio, 92.7 FM.
Cash, 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 and more cash. Get 8.1% return on your money. Rick Davis can turn your cash into real money. Gold and silver bullion. American Eagle Gold. The banks give you a measly 1.9%. At Rick Davis Gold and Diamond, you'll get 8.1% return on your money. 8.1% return on your money. Wow! Whether you're buying an ounce or 100 ounces, Rick guarantees it in writing. 8.1% Rick Davis Gold and Diamonds. Brainerd Road, Chattanooga.
Let's face it, Old Faithful isn't as faithful as it used to be. Constant repairs are a hassle and can rack up quick and money and time. Landers McClarty Ford can fix that. Right now, you can get a 2016 Ford Focus, 34,000 miles, only $11,491. A 2017 Chevy Spark with only 17,000 miles for less than $12,000. A 2015 Volkswagen Jetta with less than 21,000 miles for $11,991. Yeah, browse their entire inventory of new and new-to-you cars, trucks, and SUVs online at Landers McCarty Ford of FortPayne.com. Landers McClarty Ford of Fort Payne. If you can't find your next perfect ride, they'll go find it for you. Big city selection, small town prices, friendly service, and top dollar for your trade. The savings are waiting and only a short drive away, so what are you waiting for? Get started with your personalized shopping today at Landers McClarty Ford of FortPayne.com.
Join Nuga Radio and the Gridiron Gang live from 7 to 9 at Starbucks at 10 North on the North Shore. We're talking all things high school football. There's a specialty brew or refresher weekly inspired by the game of the week. Sweet treats, extended hours all season long, and we're pet friendly. Portions of all proceeds support local schools and educational scholarships as well as after-school programs. It's football time in Tennessee. Join us every Thursday live from 7 to 9 at Starbucks, 10 North, your North Shore neighborhood living room.
Your home is a constant work in progress. Repaint the walls? Yeah, easy enough. Leaky faucet? There's a video for that. But roof repair? You might want some help. That's where Chattanooga Roofing Contractors come in. They have 3 generations of roofing excellence you can count on. Leave the ladder in the garage. Go to chatroofing.com. That's chatroofing.com for Chattanooga Roofing Contractors, a roofing company you can trust.
It's that time of year again. For the 7th year, Wings Over North Georgia Air Show will be Saturday, October the 13th, and Sunday, October the 14th. You'll see some of our government's finest assets flying in the world today. The rarely seen Air Combat F-22 Raptor demo team and the A-10 Warthog will both headline the show, along with Tora Tora Tora, which is the reenactment of Pearl Harbor to include pyrotechnics. Patty Wagstaff and Michael Goulian, both world aerobatic champions, will be showing off their amazing skills, along with numerous other aviation rock stars. On the ground, you'll be able to experience military static displays and even have an opportunity to ride in a Huey or Cobra helicopter. Wings Over North Georgia is an action-packed way to spend a weekend with your family. You can even camp on the grounds. The Richard B. Russell Regional Airport is the place for all the action on October the 13th and the 14th. For tickets and camping reservations, visit wingsovernorthgeorgia.com.
Man, you sure you know what you're doing?
Yeah, I worked with my dad on his truck all the time. Just one more bolt to go.
Yeah, wrong bolt. Today's truck ain't your daddy's truck. For repairs on today's vehicles, you need Amco Transmission and Total Car Care of Chattanooga on Lee Highway. Stay on the road, not in the garage. Amco Transmission on Lee Highway. Get it done the right way. The Thompson Pet way. Yeah, I just put that anywhere.
Join We've Got You Covered with Scott Schrader every Saturday from 10 to 11 on Nuga Radio. From finance to fixtures, we discuss everything you need to know about buying or owning a home, the pitfalls, the perks, and everything in between. Saturday mornings, 10 to 11, right here on Nuga Radio.
Nuga Radio, Chattanooga weather.
Expect partly sunny and warm weather out there through your afternoon. Can't rule out a spotty shower passing through, but not many. Highs into the lower 80s. Tonight, lows only 65 to 67. For Tuesday, partly cloudy, back into the lower 80s with more sunshine and even warmer weather for the midweek. Tired of the pressures and hassles of car shopping? Come see what more people are making the short drive to Jackson Chevrolet Buick GMC in Lafayette or online at jacksongm.com. That's Jackson Chevy Buick GMC in Lafayette. And I'm Soar Jean 12, Chief Meteorologist at your 4.
Nuga Radio 92.7.
Now, the smartest guy with a bow tie in Chattanooga, Tennessee, David Toulis.
David Toulis here. Make sure you go to my GoFundMe page. That is to say, the page that David Toulis, the man, has up at GoFundMe, seeking support for his work here, so I can pay my dues, if you will, to the radio station. Our station is 92.7 FM, 95.3 FM HD4, providing real public service. We take our duty as a federally licensed business very, very seriously. We are here to provide the great service, information, national news, national sports, local sports. We have sports at the wazoo here at the radio station. I don't know the first thing about sports. I'll have you know that. So I'm much more like Marie Mott at 11, loco-centric, free market oriented, humane government, where government cares, where city council actually cares and is active in the interests of the people. That's what I'm about here on the David Toulis Show. I've been at it for 6 years, And this show has been on the air for it's an unguarded show, right? There's no one to tell me to not say something, right? So I try every day on my program to give the best analysis and offend people. I'm afraid I do sometimes. I'm not a joiner. I don't have groups that I whose interests I'm serving. The one time I was a member of Gun Owners of America, I paid the $25 to be a part of that group, and because it doesn't make any compromises on the right to bear arms, while the NRA is constantly doing so. I don't join, and so I'm not trying to curry favor with people, and the people I'm trying to find favor for, or should I say with? Let's see, the people with whom I'm trying to find favor are people like you, common, ordinary working people who probably drink beer, right? And are always having to check your checkbook because you're not sure where your roof repair is going to come from. Not sure where the car repair bill is going to get paid. You can't delay much longer on that repair. And so you're constantly worried about money. I'm in some ways in the same situation here, David Toulis. So GoFundMe is a way where you can connect with me personally, and it's it's a donation. It's a donation for me to pay my way at the station, which has me on for free. Now, what I mean to say is that I'm one of the assets of the station, and so, in a way, I don't have to pay rent for my time, right? I don't pay rent for 2 hours every day. But on the other hand, there is me, David Toulis, whose work is always in charity. It is always a charitable labor, loving my neighbor as myself, and trying to glorify God in the details. And as blogger, and the man who benefits people by writing about them, right? That is to say, if I write about a victim of government, I'm helping that person by the fact that I'm writing a story about that person and getting the other side and then giving my report, right? And it's an analysis, and my biases are very clear. I'm for the Constitution, I'm for obedience to law, and for limits upon state actors. That's because we have such depredation, such warfare by state actors against the people today. So common we don't even see it, but what I try to do is make people aware. As reporter and publisher at Nuganomics.com, which is a free website, right? It's free. I think in the 7 years I've written Nuganomics.com, I think someone gave me $100 once as blogger. So it's a blog that is a place where I can think through the news and declare what's important, and that's why it's there, and so do support me on the David Toulis Show at GoFundMe.com. Again, that's Nuganomics.com, and the number to call to get on the show today is 800-8949, 800-8949. Brought to you by Router Pros, also a top-notch, just absolutely outstanding plumbing business in North Georgia, but serving, of course, all the Chattanooga area. Now, what I want to get to is, I'd say highlighted by a quote from a woman, Deanna Letson, who called 911 a couple Sundays ago now, when a man named Jeremy Allen Kahn was having a schizophrenic episode, and he perished at the hands of Hamilton County Sheriff's deputies, being tasered. The quote is on one platform, Channel 9. He's screaming, "Oh God, it hurts so bad. Please stop. Somebody make him stop. Somebody please help." She explained. He said, "Oh my God, my heart." And that was it. That's a quote from Diana Letson, quoted by TV9, the death of a man. Now, my argument for the free market would touch on that, and it is grievously injured by such reports. Okay, and we have cop outbreaks a lot lately. We have seemingly innumerable cop outbreaks. There's the one where a man has an injured testicle. Okay, there's that story as well that it just kind of slipped past me late last week, but it was a detailed account in the Chattanooga Times Free Press. We're glad that it was there, right? We're glad that the newspaper covers these stories. So Jeremy Allen Kahn, the quote is one I don't want to let be forgotten, of this man whose funeral I think may have been a couple of days ago. But the name is David Toulis, and we want to suggest that there be a civilizing influence brought upon the government. Okay, the government has in our Constitution a limit. Okay, there are all kinds of limits, and we understand that the limits are hard to see sometimes, right? Sometimes they're hard to perceive. Sometimes one can plan a program that goes around a law, right? Goes around a barrier or a prohibition, and provides some great public service. Well, there are many instances where that's happened, and in many respects, one could say that practically our constitutional protections are shot down at every point. The First Amendment is probably the last to go, but I have an alternative theory that is very can-do, and while it admits these things, right? My analysis on the David Toulis show admits these decimations of constitutional liberties at almost every point. On the other hand, because I'm an optimist and believe in human progress, because I'm a Christian and have a post-millennial ethic, you could say, a positive view of the end, right? My eschatology is highly, highly positive. Progress is being made. Man is being better and made better and better every year by the gospel. That's my contention. That's my observation. In fact, when you consider the evils that we're fighting today, how mild they are compared to the evils, say of 300 BC. Or even the evils of the 1930s, right? Under Marxism and communism. The evils now in our country are mild in comparison. There are always, of course, the exceptions in African dictatorships where the dictator would brutally hack off the heads of several people himself before going out for a martini. We have much gain, but now there are improvements that have to be made. And so what we do here is we magnify the problem areas. Hopefully that you, my listener, can encourage your city council member to get to work, right? Get to work on reform. We have the promise of reform in the naming of David Roddy as the chief of police. But things are not working out very well. And this is despite David Roddy's best intentions. And the reason reforms are difficult, you just got to understand why bad police work, violent police work, tasing people in their faces, tasing people in their testicles, pulling the trigger over and over and over again. Why that has to happen? Because there's the culture is the culture of control. Officers are trained, whether they're deputies or cops, they're trained to take control of the situation, right? It's the use of force continuum, the threat continuum, you could say, to overwhelm and overcome the so-called free man, right? The free man. Many people who are shot down, tased, beaten, are simply crossing the street, right? They're simply lighting a cigarette. They're simply making a purchase in a drugstore, and they have a violent confrontation. There is this problem of escalation. And escalation, the whole crisis of escalation in encounter by encounter by encounter is very difficult to rein in. It's difficult to rein in because the system and the training of these officers and the culture is of the heroic, brave, strong man. I'm sure you saw this morning on Facebook, on our new radio page, the story about the Roswell policemen who have, in January, a boy, 13, all wet. The temperature is 17 degrees, and the boy's not telling the cops what they want to know about his parents or their address. He's not cooperating. So what do these cops do? According to a courageous TV newscast that went after the meat. Show me the meat. And this newscaster went after it and reports it, getting the video. You know what the cops did? They put this boy in a cruiser. They opened all the windows. Meanwhile, they went over to another cruiser where the engine was running, and they were all warm. And this boy was kept locked in this car. The windows were down. Of course, he's in the cage in the back, and he's freezing. Ice is formed on his clothes, and they're demanding this information from him. Well, the cops who did this, one of them was given an award as the leading officer of the year. The chief knew about this. Everybody knew about this, and yet they all went along. The TV newscast showed the photographs from the celebratory event of this brave and fine man in Roswell's department getting this award, and they all knew about it. So how is it that works? Where are the bad apples? Are they all bad apples, or is it that the bad apples make the other 10% look bad? That's the question. Because if you cooperate with something like this, which is simply inhuman, it is simply a form of torture to keep a boy for many minutes wet in a cold car in a cage. To get him to speak. There is something fundamentally wrong with the whole ethic of your work. Your work is at the basis wrong. And how can you not back away from that? Well, you can't back away from it. No one can back away from it. These cases are all across the country. There are case after case after case like this one. Here's one, for example. There's a man, and I need to get on with this, so I'm going to keep this short. Please call me. Right, you want to change the topic? I'm happy that you do so. And that's the story about out of Fredericksburg of David Washington, who's having a stroke, and he's tased in his face because he's not responding to officers. Then there's the story off of Georgia Tech campus. The campus officer Tyler Beck, a year later, has he kills a student who's holding a multi-tool, who's having some kind of psychotic episode, as being a student sometimes can cause, right? That you have this. And this student is holding a tool, and is shot dead. And then the story about Demoria Hogg in Oakland, California, when his family's 3 years later, this comes out, a $1.2 million settlement, a 40-minute standoff. He's having he's hard of hearing. He's sleeping in his car. The engine's running. There's a gun in the front seat, and rather than just open that door next to the sleeping man and grab that weapon to make sure they're safe, the officers have a standoff that lasts for 40 minutes, and then they shoot him dead. And he's not responsive, and yet the cops are willing to offload risk so much that they are not willing to be reasonable or take any risk at all. And that is not why any officer goes into that line of business. I don't think, unless some want to replicate their Afghanistan, Iraq experiences. Maybe there you have someone who's continuing the war against the unseen enemy, right? The enemy that's always lurking with RPG or IED or AK to kill you, right? And that can't be. That simply cannot be. And so the problem on the police side is, well, we're not getting a lot of recruits, right? We're getting a bad name. People don't want to be cops anymore. That, I would say, that's a good problem for us, right? A good problem for you, my listener, and I, because what we want to have is a free society. We want to have a free people. And if we are free people, then there's no one, absolutely no one, who can say, get on your knees, as I watched in an encounter this morning getting ready for the show. And then put your nose on the tarmac. There's just simply no one who can do that. And the dog is barking, right? The police dog. You have been riding on a bike without your light, and you're being pulled over now. And so the dog is sick upon you because you are not cooperating quickly enough, right? You're not bowing down. Do you know that if we were subject to a potentate with crowns, a harem off on the right-hand door there in front of his palatial entrance by his throne. His harem is on the right. He's got some ministers and officials on the left, and you come before him wanting a favor, right? This, of course, is a picture of a government where there is no rule of law. There's just the rule of the person, right? Rule by man, not rule by law. We don't have rule by law today. We have sovereign individuals in the government who can tell you to lie on your face, and then give you conflicting demands. As Avery Gray's daughter was given conflicting demands, and then roughly brutalized by a man who's giving you orders. If you are a free person, you do not take orders, period. And if you are a guardian of the public safety, then don't give orders. Okay, because if you're giving orders like that and humiliating people, especially if they're African American, especially if they're young male, why do we have a gang problem? We have a gang problem because we have the larger gang that of the city as they see it, right? Young black men see the gang, the largest gang, the largest territorial claim against them is that of the police. They're not wrong to see it that way. They're not. It's not irrational and it's not hate-filled, right? This is a rational human response to an oppressive, larger gang that really can't be beat. Of course, it can be beat. Police harassment of gang members can be beat by them knowing the law, them knowing their constitutional rights. And gang members, just because you're a gang member and have a record doesn't mean that everything you do is a sin. Not everything you do is a crime. Being alive is not a crime, even though you are a member of a gang. You're on the list, right? You met the very low barrier, the very low qualifications list to be a gang member in Chattanooga. You're not deserving of death just because you have these connections, and you may have a symbol on your face, right, or on your arm, and you may carry a 10 millimeter pistol. What we want to have in the idea of local economy and the free market that we espouse at my church, right? We hear this argument at my church that there needs to be, by starting with the Christian people in the city, more grace applied to people out in the city. The Great Commission and the Greatest Commandment, I heard this Sunday, are really the same thing. The Great Commission, go out and make disciples of nations, is the same as you shall love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and your neighbor as yourself. Those are together where you, my listener, have an effect for other people. You, my listener, looking out for other people. The man who's been humiliated over and over again, Anthony Byrd, on the city council, who has been a young black man, very well-spoken man, his whole life has been dealing with cops. I've said this once before. When I asked him, how many times have you been stopped by the police? He said 20, 30, 40 times. I can't even count. When I first met him, that was my first question. And that is typical. And that is simply wrong. Is it a problem of racism? Maybe. But the deeper problem, the problem that is first, that needs to be addressed and that can be addressed by people like you, especially vis-a-vis the city council, especially tomorrow, every Tuesday. You, my listener, go and complain about this problem to the city, right? You, my listener, especially if you have a story to tell it to me, right? Tell me the story, David Toulis. Just contact me through the station or contact me through Nuganomics.com, and then tell the city, tell the people who can stop it. The mayor is impervious to discussion on this point. He pretends he's above the police, that somehow they're separate from him. No, they report directly to him. They obey him at every point. He just has to say, my policy now is different. I'm changing policy. Okay, we're changing policy, and we're going to make it happen. We're going to make it so that we don't have people bowing and scraping, and that if anybody on my staff uses the F word or the MF word or the S word, or makes a threat about taking someone to jail, then that person's fired. I don't care how much we spent in training, that person is fired, period. That's what the mayor needs to do. And if the mayor won't do it, then the city council, which has more than just advice and consent role, right? The city council sets policy too. It needs to pass an ordinance. But, getting there, I understand. Getting there, someone has to take initiative. Someone has to lobby for a vote. Let's get this thing passed, right? Let's make every officer have to have $5 million personal liability that he pays for himself. Minor details like that. That's a minor detail, a minor reform that would go far in saving American lives. And that's what I'm about, saving American lives and having a free society where if we are truly free, and I think we are. I think we are. If we think we are, we are. Right? If we think we're not, we're not. And so it's a matter of how you perceive things, right? I'm going to live a free life if I can. And I'm here to help you to do that, right? By encouragement. My administrative notice project is so that you can take advantage of the law in your favor. It's called Transportation Administrative Notice. It's a project that began came into public in February 20 and is making slow gains across the landscape. David Toulis, News Radio. Next is Sean Hannity, the great Sean Hannity in Washington.
3, 2, 1.
Chattanooga Radio. Digital FM 95.3 HD4. 92.7 FM's news. now.
A head-on collision claimed the life of 33-year-old Veronica Romero Saturday. Traffic investigators say it happened on Dayton Boulevard when a Volkswagen Jetta driven by Miss Romero was hit head-on by a Kia that crossed the center line, driven by 26-year-old Carpio Brooks, who sustained serious injuries. Charges are pending against Mr. Brooks. Signal Mountain Boulevard shut down after a tree fell on a motorcyclist, shutting down power for a portion of Red Bank. The tree fell into an intersection, taking down with it power lines and blacking out EPB customers. The motorcyclist rushed to the hospital with serious injuries. And Deontay Rice was shot on Windsor Street Friday night. CPD confirms he was taken to Erlanger, where he was later pronounced dead. Major Crimes Unit is investigating. If you have information on who fired the fatal shots, give the CPD a call. You can remain anonymous. Belle St. John for Nuga Radio, News Talk 92.7, Action News now.
Sean Hannity, weekday afternoons from 3 to 6 p.m. on Nuga Radio 92.7 FM.
Nuga Radio
92.7. Nuga Radio, Chattanooga weather.
Except partly sunny and warm weather out there through your afternoon. Can't rule out a spotty shower passing through, but not many. Highs into the lower 80s. Tonight, lows only 65 to 67. For Tuesday, partly cloudy, back into the lower 80s with more sunshine and even warmer weather for the midweek. Tired of the pressures and hassles of car shopping? Come see what more people are making the short drive to Jackson Chevrolet Buick GMC in Lafayette or online at jacksongm.com. That's Jackson Chevy Buick GMC in Lafayette. And I'm Sorgene 12, Chief Meteorologist at your 4.
Radio 92.7.
My ex recently hacked my email and my social media, and it really caused me some problems. I changed all my passwords, which helped, but I'm still getting trolled, maybe even stalked. I know it's him. I just can't prove it.
My business, well, it's been broken into twice already. I've got cameras, but that only helps after the fact. I'd rather prevent it from happening in the first place.
Unity One East is your solution to these and many other security concerns. With private investigation, security services, and backed by decades of real-life experience in military and law enforcement, Unity One East is your instant contact for security, investigation, and consultation to help protect you, your family, and your business. No 1-800 number, no red tape, no wait, because Unity One East is local and available 24/7. Reclaim your peace of mind. Call Unity One East, 475-6206, 475-6206.
Call 423-875-3600 if you're looking to expand your professional look of your business. Then consider the vast opportunities that are available when you locate your office with the Rains Group family. Remember, it's location, 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 and the Rains Group has the location for your professional office. Check out the spaces for lease at Executive Business Park on the Lee Highway. Small or large, we will build to suit your needs with the Rains Group. Call 423-875-3600 for the business professionals with the Rains Group.
Nuga Radio.
Are you brain dead? Still voting for pathetic liberals? Take 3 hours of Sean Hannity from 3 to 6.
Nuga Radio.
Then call us in the morning between 9 and 11.